Machine? Don't talk about me like I'm a machine. I'm not that.
All this chrome's catching up with you, baby. You're about to drive headfirst off the cliff with no way back off.
私は情報の海で発生した生命体だ。
This channel has no shortage of vague and abstract topics. We've considered what the idea of self really means, the possibilities of what a soul could be and how limitation forms it, what the point of having faith in anything is. These topics are admittedly a kind of escape for me. I take my mind as what creates value in my life, exploring and researching in the hopes that I can make my mark or connection with others through what's inside my head, rather than what my body is or looks like. Because, well, we all know that the body is a temporary state. Whatever kind of life we face, age takes its toll and one day the body fails. It's a terrifying thought that the culmination of so many memories, emotions, and connections which comprises a person just stops. The mere consideration of the infinite nothing which comes afterwards used to send me directly into a panic attack on the floor. And that's part of why I've dug so far into these topics, ones where the body is often just a physical representation of themes relating to the mind. I want to believe in a split between the two, so that I don't have to face a universe which will just carry on without my awareness one day. At least, that's what I said 2 years ago when a first version of this video was written. But as I've learned and changed this a lot to reflect, it is even more complicated than that. I didn't dig into these abstract topics just because I was a little afraid of death, but unknown to myself for years, I did it exactly because there was a mismatch between my body and my mind. The pain of the wrong form in the mirror, it was the entire driver behind what my mind was doing, as I slowly justified a decision I had yet to even know I could make. I spent years uncovering the secrets of the mind to cope with the blunt truths of the form, to prove that the body didn't factor into the equation at all so long as the mind had a different intent. And this is all true. All physical classification is flawed, the result of the mind's desire for simplicity. After all, no definitions existed for us to find, we just wrote them all and decided they were fact. Everything about the body is labeled by the mind. And yet, this mental pursuit was all driven by the body I didn't control, screaming in silence. I learned how abstract the world could be because my body needed it to. So which one is it then? Does my perception create all there is, or is the form it's stuck within the true judge of an actual reality? Today, I wanted to explore that through some narratives you probably know, looking at how strong this link is, what the balance of it should be, if our common conceptions about it are right or wrong, and how it all meshes to form what we call a self. So, with a warning of spoilers ahead for Serial Experiments Lain, Akira, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and Ghost in the Shell, let's explore this undeniable link which terrifies me so.
Why are you acting like the part of me that I hate? I'm lame just like you are now, aren't I?
Mankind is a creature that no longer evolves.
I think it's only appropriate to start with Serial Experiments Lain because it provides the most classic example of how the mind and body are thought about, and then showcases how that traditional thinking could be flat out wrong. Now, the anime is a trip of a series where a young girl named Lain essentially merges human consciousness with the internet-like collection of devices and their functions named the Wired, due to a protocol put in place by its most current release with Masami Iri, one of the key designers on the project. He placed his own code and memories within their essential internet, meaning that when he dies, he reemerges on the Wired as its god of sorts, able to use it to its fullest extent and even manifest in the real world to communicate with Lain, who he tries to convince to join him in the Wired. He has deeply personal reasons for doing this that we will get to, but whatever leads him to desire these beliefs, the beliefs are that the body is holding humanity back. Citing details like an incident rate of cancer, which is just the uncontrolled multiplication of cells, so low that we couldn't possibly be evolving, he thinks an escape of all humans to the Wired is the only way to cure our stasis. Without these fleshy prisons holding us back, we could achieve a higher level of human existence, right? Comparing us to machines, it's the logic like that of trying to run a modern game on that outdated desktop in your parents' basement. The hardware which is stuck in the past in physicality limits the software which isn't. A large part of that hardware limitation is because of the body's desires and needs. As he bluntly states it,
They keep their bodies merely to satisfy the desires of the flesh.
bodies are inherently limiting. I mean, the very necessity of nutrition and sleep means that we can't be tackling important problems all the time. If we try to, our work just gets sloppy from dehydration, malnutrition, and exhaustion. We have to stop and rest. Limitation number one. But those needs also turn into desires. I mean, the most effective way to make a creature which survives is by tying its needs to its pleasure. Whether it feels a negative signal from lacking something or a positive one from gaining it, it leads to the same good result. Eating, sleeping, drinking, all of them can either be torture or excess. But in our modern, comfortable context, one's scarce pleasure becomes a purely selfish route to fulfillment. I mean, we see this aplenty in the show. Clubs full of people partying away nondescriptly, with children occupying the same space as if no adult could care, so focused on pleasure, these new drugs, that they forget how inappropriate it all is. And we see Lane's sister leaving from a man's apartment the morning after, without a word, ignoring calls for connection to leave it at base pleasure, literally not speaking to him. The body has taken control of the species, limitation 2. As such, Eerie, and probably we sometimes, see the removal of the body as a sort of ascension. The prison of flesh is left behind as we reach a new height of the mind alone, no longer burdened by the least presentable aspect of human nature. But would a world without bodies really be free of such shame? How do we know that base pleasures would be gone, or that our worst aspects would be left behind? I think Lane actually shows us the opposite. Lane is a lonely girl. Her family is distant and probably not even actually real. Most of her friends are really just mean to her in a slightly friendly way, and she sits alone in an empty room most nights, only accompanied by the shadows of stuffed animals on her windowsill. I've spoken about it before, but the world-building details of Lane like that, the empty rooms, the cold silence, are fantastic. It is a lack of words that explains all of her actions. She will do anything to connect with others, whether that's going to a club she hates or answering an email from a dead girl. Chisa is a classmate who became willingly deceased, spawning a series of prank emails from her account saying she's alive and well on the Wired. In reality, she actually is. Lane is the only one who answers and follows the thread that's revealed, starting by upgrading her dust-gathering basic Navi into a more intense model, and eventually ending on her entire room becoming a tumor of tech, literally busting out of its own captivity. This changes her immensely, with her father unable to recognize the girl now standing defiantly before him. A once shy and timid daughter who had to barely creep into his room now stands in front of him, confident and assertive, at times even angry or sadistic. The more she delves into tech, the more unknown she becomes, even to herself. People begin to tell Lane about seeing her doing wild things she has no memories of, and her varied and endless legend spreads across the Wired as she desperately seeks to understand what she, or as she believes her other selves, have done. This split weighs on her, driving her to try more and more to control the Wired and information overall to prevent this spillover of her other selves, with mental breakdowns aplenty from all of it. The point is that the lack of a body hasn't evolved Lane, it's led her to ruin, not able to even know her own form. There are many ways to see such an abstract series, and believe me, we have here. But today I think we should look at the other selves like this. Imagine our essence is like a gas. It has definitive traits and specific measures, but no shape or volume of its own. It just expands to fit the container. In a jar, you can see it, study it, know what it is. The smallest parts of the composition are there, but drowned out by the total being so condensed. But take off the lid and it disperses until not a trace is left. Its once shape entirely lost, and every once small part now a majority somewhere. This may be the body without a self restricting it, or the self without a body restricting it. If I, as myself, want to pick something up, I have to be somewhere within 4 feet of it to do so. The will of my mind to handle that object is only exerted through the confines of my body's abilities. To take a thought which is in my head and make it appear in the physical world, I have to expend energy to move it through impulses from my brain to my mouth in the specific sounds of a designated language that I have learned. This requirement of time, space, energy to express the mind keeps it distinct. I and those around me are aware of its extents at all times. But if everything was simply happening with the mind as the outermost layer, then those aspects of time, space, and energy fall away. It's possible that every thought we have, which now wouldn't need to be spoken through a mouth or written on paper, would just happen as it did, freed into the world without energy expended. I think this is what's happening with Lane's other selves. They're not actually full selves, but just the unrestricted flow of her mind, lesser qualities which never warranted energy before. Her most impulsive thoughts, the ones which normally die in the translation from mind to body, where we have to decide if they're worth the energy to make them real, are now freed the moment they happen. She can cause a scene in a club, or organize a rave, or spread rumors about a friend, because whatever intrusive thought comes into her head will instantly be spread to reality without a body limiting it. And it could happen without her knowledge because her perspective is still limited. No one can observe everything at all times, because to do so would be to lack a sense of self at all, as you're infinite. There's no way to know your shape. If you're everything, you become nothing. And so this expression occurs where she's not aware of it, just the same as where she is. Her self has outgrown her bounds. Other aspects of her are literally beyond her control without a container, in the same way that objects outside of your range are unable to be picked up. Only now those objects are your thoughts. And what is the end of this? Is there any way to avoid that drift off into infinity where a self no longer even exists? Sure, we're free to tackle the more important problems without a body to focus on, but those more important problems are often so because they're impossible. Lane asks, "Who am I?" which is a question with no answer. There is no self, there's only this current one in this current context, which will change as the world does tomorrow and the day after, forever. I mean, this is seen with Lane even before The Wired. Look at her home self. Yes, much like she is at school, but in more comfortable clothes, free to express that weakness instead of feeling like she has to interact and hide it. And then there's her self at the club, appearing even more nervous and reserved by comparison. Her modest outfit compared against one's much less so, literally covering herself up in fear. There is no one Lane, there's only Lane within context. The body, it may be here to keep us limited as our context, to prevent us from going insane by tackling infinite questions. She starts the show limited, forced to listen to her body and her physical situation, eating dinner with her family, even if it's awkward and silent. It's not pleasurable, but it must be done to accomplish anything else, putting an end to her questions. No one worries about who they are when their stomach is empty, after all. Taking a break loses the continuity required to chase a real result, and nuance lost in the thoughts which are pushed aside by the body. But by the end, when Lane's form isn't important, instead of the dinner table, she's just surrounded by infinite chattering head versions of herself on every body imaginable. Probably a representation of every answer she's found to the question, "Who am I?" from how long she's been allowed to look without pause. With nothing requiring her to ever stop, what she eventually finds is so many answers that there effectively is no answer. Lost, she just ends up erasing herself and all memories of her form to the world to simplify. The only answer is no answer. Overthinking all of her actions and everything forever, she's lost to the chaos of infinite logic that a body once prevented. And this doesn't just impact her sense of self, but also her connection with others, the ability to express the important thoughts that lacking a body was supposed to benefit. When she's talking with Chisa, well, it doesn't happen instantly. She has to go and clear off the Navi she never used, booting it up and learning how it operates to chase this lead. She does it out of desperation for connection, but that makes it an act of importance. It's her saying, without words, that connection is worth diving into this technology that she's always avoided, facing her fears. The same is true of going out to the club with her friends, even though she hates it. She's limited to one time, one place, and so she has to choose the one she hates because it's how she builds a bond with them. They like it. Connection is worth the cost, the use of her limited self. She has to figure out what to say, when to say it, what words are best, and where it should be said. Being limited together on their time and energy as resources of the body, they're all forced to make the most of it, give it their all to achieve connection with each other. But without that limitation, if you just went on endlessly, well, there's actually no reason to polish your thoughts, to present your best, because now they're expressed instantly, without effort. There's no gap to cover between your mind and theirs, between bodies. They just hear your mind directly. But your experiences are still different, so your thoughts will be too, meaning the difference is now just that they aren't refined. What they hear from you isn't tailored carefully to them anymore, it just is. It's just chaos as each person throws more and more out there in an unending stream without break and hoping an expression meant for them will stick if there is enough of it, because none of it takes time or energy anymore. Without a body to force careful consideration, it doesn't seem like we'd actually enjoy each other's company anymore. We see this when the series goes even further off the deep end, and Lain merges human consciousness with the wired, so that now everyone is connected on an unconscious level. Now she can communicate to everyone and manipulate the world at will from her mind alone, as she does around Alice many times. So she shouldn't be lonely now, right? She is literally connected. As they say, everyone is always connected. And yet, she is lonely. Alice is the only real friend of hers in that little group. But the others are more like light bullies. She actually expresses concern for Lain multiple times, tries to get her to come out and have the others accept her. But the more and more Lain tries to chase herself, the more and more she also loses Alice, who notably says,
"Lately, it seems you've been slipping away again. We wanted to make an effort to include you in on everything we do. We wanted to take you out and make you happy somehow."
The one person who actually cares about her, enough to dig through the squalor her home devolves into as she becomes entirely focused on the mind, ending up crying before Lain as she explains this new form of connection, a space where Lain's unrestricted worst thoughts ruined Alice's life by spreading her darkest secrets. Jumbled chaos is what flows from her mouth, untailored to anyone but her. An attempt to connect everyone, removing the literal separation caused by bodies. It just made her words indecipherable, drove the one person who was willing to understand her even further apart. This is because they've lost what they always shared, the body and its consequences. Lain, Alice, and the others are quite different people. What they enjoy is far and wide, and how they act is too. But they all went to the same school, wore the same uniform, know the same streets. They all have parents and get hungry and thirsty and tired. Are these the kinds of commonalities that would make two people into best friends? Of course not. But they are things that each one has experienced to bridge to those deeper topics, to get a sense for who the other is and how to express more important things. I mean, if you're both complaining about being tired, the reason for that state will probably follow, and that will be guaranteed to be more revealing than the simple body-based lead-in. And so a time and place, those are the easiest things to begin connecting with someone over. And without a body, well, they're almost entirely lost. As Alice expresses to try and return Lain from her high-minded chaos, everyone has a heartbeat. Taking her friend's hand and placing it to feel hers, they're able to share in the most fundamental thing, literally the sign of life itself, of all of its beautiful limitations which make their connection specific and valuable. If they can connect over this, something so simple in such a peaceful moment, then what is everything else for? Lain spent so much energy overthinking how to connect with people, missing that the means are always there, so long as we share something, a body, a set time and place. Going higher above to the mind, to our own specifics, well, it can be good, but if everything else can make that connection too, then maybe the mind is just more pure selfishness than selflessness. Returning to where we started, we see this with Masami Iri, in his mentality that he is better than others for giving up the flesh. He is a manipulative and angry man, spending most of his time trying to convince Lain that she's a collection of software to be used and not an actual person as she believes, that she should be used rather than having a will of her own. We see his motivation for this in the final episode. With the world reset to a previous state, this is a him who never gave up his body. He's just a man walking down the street mumbling his grievances about how he's better than the work his company gives him, and one day he'll show them that. He thinks he should be the boss. And so that's why he became God, the biggest boss. He didn't need to place his memories in the wired to achieve his goal, but he did that because he wanted the power, the influence he always lacked. This isn't pure desire for evolution, it's social comparison. He's become an exaggeration of the worst qualities he had with a body. At least there they were limited, emerging only as far as others allowed them to in restricted space. His anger and manipulation were tempered by consequence and conflict. But here, without those restrictions, well, he just becomes the worst of himself, taking that control that once made him feel weak himself. Leaving behind the body didn't suddenly rid him of his ills just because he didn't find pleasure in base desires anymore, because the mind has desires of its own, and there's no more guarantees that those will be healthy than the ones of the flesh. The mind can be just as flawed, just as selfish. So, can we really say that the body is what's holding us back?
I can do this too?
So we've seen how important the link between the two is with serial Experiments Lain. There is and has to be a connection between the mind and body. But how do we weigh those sides, and how will it impact us? Is it better for the body to control the mind, or the mind to control the body? Let's start with the former, and how it can be seen in the classic Akira. While I may have had an unpopular take on the movie before, I do think its classic status is deserved, and it's a work with interesting ideas and a superb presentation that should be remembered and watched. So you should go do that. We start off with the apocalyptic disaster which creates this world, and then a few of the denizens of it. The Pills, a gang of teenagers on motorbikes. Tetsuo is the runt of the gang, with the worst bike and always at the will of the others. If one needs saving, it's going to be him. We see this all the way back to the moment he and Kaneda, the leader of their gang, met at an orphanage. The latter fought off the bullies who stole the former's toy and returned it to him, starting this bond that persists into current time. Of course, it's a form of care, but it isn't all good, as it also brews some resentment. Each time Tetsuo is saved, it's proved that he's weaker than Kaneda, that he can't handle the same kinds of situations. At corners the others take easily, he's the one to wipe out. A little bit shorter, a little bit lighter, and a year younger, he remains the weakest of the lot, always. While these differences aren't enough to make them super distinct, it's just enough to be felt, and as they're growing up, enough that Tetsuo is never catching up. And he's sick of it. I mean, for reasons he can't help, age and genetics, the body, he always feels so much worse, a negative impact on the mind. Sure, he makes some comments here and there, but he's the runt because he doesn't have the physical means to change a physical situation. He can't just will himself to become bigger or fight someone who's stronger. He can't just make himself large enough to swing weight around those corners as well as the older kids. He can murmur under his breath that he could handle Kaneda's bike too. He desires it, but that desire doesn't turn into proof. The older boy kicks him off to climb on himself. And so, stuck in this time and place, how others view him and how he views himself as such is first controlled by the body he can't help, not the choices he makes or who he wants to be. And this then alters who he wants to be by what he has to prove, giving him a massive inferiority complex. He views everything in physical comparison. He's weaker than Kaneda, his bike is worse than Kaneda's. These observable physical factors determine his mindset and his goals and all motivations. While the others actually relax a bit and hang out in their usual spaces, Tetsuo sits outside observing what Kaneda has that he doesn't. How he thinks, his mind, is entirely derived first from the body. Now, a big part of this is assisted by how the world views this relationship between form and thought as well. If they lived in a place where complex thoughts could earn you a good living or make you popular, Tetsuo could have come out of this differently. There wouldn't be a real reason for him to feel inferior about himself through the body if the mind could also give benefit. However, their world is one wrought with physical violence. Their school is a torn-up mess of uncontrolled students who get into fights for fun and try to have adult relationships at a young age. They emerge out into the world where biker gangs plow through traffic caused by mass protests, bombings, and military violence. It's through and through a might is right kind of world. I mean, a colonel literally just kidnaps Tetsuo. The context changes the question. It is not which controls the other, it is which does the world say should control the other. What is going to be the forefront of these youths' minds? For both their value as a person and their safety, it's physical strength. How can they be stronger to win those fights they will get into? How can they make a point that an attached upper class will see? And in the long term, what is the point of it all? These are youths failed by a society with no prospects. No matter how good they do in school, they'll never have a job which lets them escape a harsh world. The future doesn't exist for children of poor families in this world. So, how could the pleasures of the mind, which often rely on the future, even feel good for them? What does expanding knowledge mean when you never see enough days to put that knowledge into practice? What they find instead is the more immediate pleasures of the body, and what those have been observed to be able to bring them. Conquest over another proving strength, and having a girl hanging on their arm proving desirability. The surroundings are what is creating the balance. This world has decided the body is more important. So we have a boy whose own world is all about physical skill in this gang, existing in a wider world where the mind has never really appeared to get anyone anywhere, and all while he simply isn't physically geared to be that strong. He's stuck in a world not meant for him because of this body-first focus. So what is his mindset going to become but a tool for the body? The only way thought is worth something is if it achieves a greater aspect of physical form in this world. The body becomes his mind. So it makes sense that when he's taken in by the colonel and his latent psychic abilities are activated, he goes on a rampage. He starts small, fighting off a few soldiers and damaging buildings, eventually crushing tanks, and by the end, destroying a whole space laser that fails to kill him and bringing apocalyptic levels of disaster once again. No bigger man with a better bite can tell him to back down now. The limitation which was always on him no longer exists. And after desiring growth for so long, why would he ever stop? It's quite ironic. He has what's essentially the capacity of the mind awakened, all the energy that it houses, its endless nature, and it's all used for physical domination. It's quite direct when he comes to fight with Kaneda, having torn through the city, and when his weapon dies, he says,
"It ain't fair, Tetsuo!"
To which he responds,
"Now do you understand how it feels being little?"
The root of it all is the body. Who can be the bigger man? Tetsuo uses the power of the mind to overcome that deficit and make himself the larger one, simulating a physical form with these mental powers, standing up and above due to rocks, a false height. That's how deep this relationship of body over mind runs, how deep a terrible world made it, that when the mind becomes the source of ultimate power, its expression is only utilized to achieve what the greatest body could. It has constrained the mind here, leading it to much worse places based on the society his mentality was formed within. This could explain why Tetsuo eventually deforms into a mass of mutating flesh from his powers overflowing. Because the only thing in his mind is to become physically powerful, to become bigger. And so what it ends up doing to his body is literally growing, feeding the latter from the energy generated by the unlocking of the former. He's focused on growth for so long that it becomes an unstable goal of his inner mind. In the link between the two, the mind becomes a puppet of the body, used only to facilitate its growth. It's in contrast to the older psychic children whose forms are much weaker and showing age. As kids, they were put into a totally different environment from Tetsuo. Where his school was covered in graffiti and full of violence, they were transported to a clean facility outside of the city. Instead of principals who attacked them, they had scientists who sat next to them calmly and observed. We see that there were harsh experiments still, but what we see them being tested on, praised for, are mental pursuits. Using their mind to manipulate objects, or sketching the complex insides of black boxes, or bending images on the TV. This is using the mind for the pursuits of the mind, not the body. With the weighting in that direction, their forms shrink and recoil, turned old and neglected, rather than growing in tumorous fashion like Tetsuo's. We see clearly that the conditioning of which should feed which is internalized and represented in their appearances. Undeniably, there is a link between the two that can't be beat. The only determination is the balance, which will be more important to us, and which is more important to our surroundings. It's a very complicated situation with many factors, having a direct impact on our forms and the mentalities within. But very clearly with Tetsuo, we see how poorly the body can impact the mind. Mutating into this terrible form, a lot of potential is wasted into purposeless and dangerous growth. The energy which could have lifted society to new heights is instead tearing it to pieces once again. Either way, there's danger. The disasters which destroyed Tokyo now twice were due to these powers of the mind. But it makes one point very clear. Neither is isolated, and neither should have total control. These two sides of our forms will always be linked and need balanced somehow.
You fucking monster. You were right, but there's no other way. Not for me.
But we should examine the other side of the scale. If the key is balance, then we have to know what happens when the mind takes over the body. This is seen in Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and the genre staple of body modification, where flesh is replaced with metal to achieve a different look or purpose. Just look at the Ripper Doc in Edgerunners, who has multiple sets of arms for different tasks. Rather than training his limbs and muscles in generalized ways as a doctor in our world would, he just swaps them out for whichever fits the situation. Each surgery could have a different set, with distinct dexterities and functions. What this means is that the mind creates the body. His physical form changes for the purposes his self wants to achieve, for his intent. If he thinks he wants to be stronger that day, he just has to pick the stronger arms. The same can be said of someone who wants to fight getting a cannon in their arm. Their desire for conflict is expressed in their form. Or someone who wants to be taller getting different legs. Their inner self, which feels more expressed in a larger height, is made more real. The mind creates the body. No longer is the cruelty of birth a factor. Everyone can walk, everyone can see, everyone can be who they wish. But is this for the best? I mean, should someone who's short, say, feel like they need to be taller, or is that just a false standard set by society, a feeling derived from years of being passed up because of ideas of physical classification? Do we ask the individual to change, get taller to be valued, or do we tear down the system which leads them to feel less valuable for something like that to begin with? Cybernetics allow greater expression, but society often controls the desire for expression, and this future is simply one where it's everyone's responsibility to work around a harsh and rigid world instead of it changing for them. After all, the more problems you make, the more solutions you can sell. A key aspect of cyberpunk worlds is money. Landscapes ruled by megacorporations built on the backs of extreme poverty and harsh class structure. The rich get extremely rich, and the poor find even deeper depths. Body modifications aren't cheap, and the control over their production and purpose is decided by those who can afford and produce them. Within context, body modification might actually be the oppression, not the solution to it. After all, in Night City, the megacorporations Arasaka and Militech hold power over, well, everything. The former even has a dedicated academy to produce their workers, although it's really nothing more than a paid barrier to entry. David Martinez, our main character, is on the low end of this scale. with a single mother working to the bone to pay for his education at said academy, hoping this would pave a way for him out of their poverty, as right now they can't even afford to keep their washer running. Everything has a subscription fee in 2026. 2076. Gloria gives up a lot to try and make this work, but at every chance, whether via price, with the required upgrades for class, social standing, as the principal suggests he should be transferred out, or physicality, literal barriers like he's bullies, those in power seek to exclude David despite his perfect grades. In terms of differences between him and the other students, well, there's nothing but money. But this creates a physical difference because of body modification. Those with money can afford to buy a better body than those without. David's classmates, who are chromed out in comparison to his flesh, are able to chip in skills which work with their cybernetic parts in order to beat the shit out of him and try and prevent him from returning to class, all without working a day in their lives. The qualities of a better self, the determination and persistence we must mentally develop to become physically stronger, they're gone. All modifications have done is make effort even less rewarding. The gap created by nonsensical biological unfairness hasn't narrowed due to body modification, but it has actually widened, as now rifts can be intentionally created. That's the unfortunate thing. To be able to rid the world of inequality means, well, the same thing as being able to create inequality. This becomes rather apparent when David loses his mother to Night City. In the almost ambient gang warfare which coats it, they end up as innocent victims, literally caught in the crossfire. And then, this accident itself doesn't actually kill her, but the response to it does, where they're left to die in the street by the fast-responding medical squad for the slower ones, and receive lackluster care when more could have been done, because they couldn't afford the packages for a speedy response, or better treatment once it had already happened. Of course this has an impact on David. He ends up having to break into his own apartment and then sit there alone in the mental torment of what he's lost, while rich bullies essentially claim that it was deserved, communicating to him directly through his brain. His already built up energy which couldn't be expressed turns angry with all this anxiety, and his worst moments yet lead him to a drastic decision: to get his first implant. His mother sold them on the side to bring in more funds, and she died before completing the handoff for a Sandevistan, a military-grade piece that essentially allows the user super speed. David rushes to a Ripper dock to get his spine ripped out and replaced with his implant, a quick but bloody and horrific scene. And still bleeding from the operation, he charges into his class and assaults his tormentors, quite firmly giving them what they deserved. We see that the principle does work both ways. It did give him a chance to fight back when he stumbled upon it, showing that it could close the gap. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. But it also reveals something telling about how much control the mind has over the body in this world. David was in a horrible place, focused entirely on the death of his mother and the hate this world holds for him. It's his first loss like that, no longer able to be supported by the only person who's ever helped him. Not only is that crushing, but it's quite literally means he's not prepared to take this world on solo. He's just a kid still developing, learning how to live. The decisions he makes now, they shouldn't define who he is. But backed into a corner by everything around him, he was forced to push back, and the mind can only do so through the body. A body which is now permanently changed because there's no way Doc is actually putting his spine back in after this. The Sandevistan is forever. His forever physical expression was driven not by careful decision, but by what these harsh conditions forced him to express in the moment. A distraught mind, the decisions of his worst times becoming permanent. Made from outside pressure, was this really David Martinez's decision, or was it Night City's? All this body modification opportunity has done is allowed the mental torment of the corporations to take a physical toll on its victims, to make him into someone he was never meant to be, a smart boy, now a brute. Those physical changes impact how he's seen, what he can do, every opportunity he'll have. The mind dictating the body has made him nothing more than his conditions. This reveals something that we don't usually consider about the body and mind. one is so much more volatile than the other. Our bodies change very gradually over time. Even if we decide we want them to look or feel different, it's a long process of something like medication or diet and exercise. Aside from injury or surgery, the body isn't very plastic in the short term, and even those things require healing, making them long term. Look at David in the first episode. His entire life changes, his mind is forever altered, but the form with which he experiences it is still the same. No matter what he feels, his face is still his face. But the mind, well, our minds can change in a matter of days, if not hours or minutes, just as his does during that time. He does go out and beat the crap out of his bully, and that's a moment where he seems confident, certain of himself. And then on the walk back home, he seems almost insane, laughing out loud in public about his own thoughts. And then once he speeds back home, an expression of that extreme energy he always has, he sits down on the couch and transitions right away into depression, remembering all that he's lost. In a span of maybe only 10 minutes, it's like he's been 3 entirely different people. The mind is wild, and the body acts to calm that, to keep us consistent. It prevents us from entirely losing our shape within those wild swings, putting the same face in different pictures so we can look back and see that no matter what, it's still us. The self exists somewhere, even if it's not certain. But these body modifications remove that rock. If we feel the mental need to beat someone up with cybernetics, we can go and have that procedure done. But we lose a part of ourselves in it. We suddenly have to handle that emotion forever in permanent results. We have to justify having changed our very form for it and alter our future choices based on one temporary desire. I can't let the implant go to waste after all. Gotta get your money's worth. The span of a few days, maybe even just a few moments, alters us for good. And if that's true, well then, does a self even exist? David calms down a bit after this, finding comfort in a group of Edgerunners, those on the fringes of society. It's a crew led by Maine, a very chromed out older brother figure for him. In their antics and company, he finds a sense of power and value that was lacking in his life, as he starts to finally take something back from this world that stole from him so frequently. Instead of sitting alone at home, engaging with brain dances or laying around sad, we get montages of him out and about enjoying what good Night City can have. With this upward momentum, there's not much negativity to be expressed from his mind into his form, and so when he does get more chrome, it's a lot more thought out, like increasing his lung capacity for their jobs. And he pairs it with training, putting those good mental qualities back into the mix as well, instead of just buying his way there. This is true and genuine improvement, and there's very little regret to be found in it. With this happiness, what he's bringing into reality is actually helping him and improving his life, rather than leaving him with a reminder of the worst times. But this is Night City. It doesn't last for long. Peeler dies to some no-name on the street, a reminder that it can all end at any instant, no matter how good it was. And then a major job goes wrong. Maine goes cyber psycho, driven to his extremes by cyberware, or more accurately, the stress this world induces to make him feel the need for those mods, and David loses a lot of the people who made his life better. He's there the moment that Maine dies even, privy to his last words, and escaping with his arms that they made a promise on not long ago, that if Maine bit it, David could take them. And he does. The hole this leaves for our main character can't be understated, as it would for anyone. Dealing with a loss like this isn't easy, to move on from what made our life feel like worth living. It's a tough process of not just days or weeks, but months or maybe even years. But we have to because it's all we can do, remembering bits of what was lost, but it can't define us forever. The pain eventually becomes mundane as the body's needs take over from the mind's torment, and we normalize. The memories eventually haze, leaving only the most important ones. We experience loss deeply, but it isn't permanent. In this world, though, it can be. David, rather than moving on from the loss of Maine, is able to become Maine. Those arms that were a mismatch for his body, way too large, he changes all of himself to make them fit. He builds up the exact same kind of form, going from scrawny kid to bulked up leader of the group, just the same as his mentor was. It's because in this world where the mind shapes the body, remembrance can go much further. You don't have to move on because you can so easily recreate. The loss isn't actually dealt with because he's preventing the loss in his body, making his physical form a representation of a better time that his mind recalls. It's like Maine is still right there, keeping his mind fixed on the past because, well, the past is what he sees in the mirror. The plasticity of the form, the mind taking precedence over the body, is actually holding his mind back. Instead of a rock to ground him, his form becomes a way to extend every detrimental thought he has, making them real and creating a cycle where negative mental state impacts the body in a worse way, which impacts the mind in a worse way, which impacts the body in a worse way, and it never ends. What's left isn't even him, but just a collection of metal. If David's mother saw him now, just a couple of years later, she wouldn't even be able to recognize him. So is this really him? He ends up staring at a picture of her and him from his past, likely thinking about this. Who really existed in that picture? Has David Martinez ever been a person? Changing his body removed parts of himself that didn't define him, but through his memories and their rigidity helped create a mark that he existed. And that's gone now, forever. As this cycle feeds into itself more and more, we can understand why cyberpsychosis isn't actually from the chrome, but the need for and reaction to it. A world which is so harsh, it forces people to destroy themselves to try and find value, literally robbing them of everything which defined them just for a chance to maybe be happy, to maybe be remembered. The change becomes so physical and undeniable, and for what? None of it helped them survive longer or truly find joy because there is no end. There is always another mod, another innovation, another legend to be greater than you like Atom Smasher and make you forgotten. The way David interacts with the world, his literal hands, aren't even his anymore. Nothing is, and it's still not enough. This is cyberpsychosis, the despair of realizing how manipulated and abused yourself has become. A silly, wild mind unrestricted by form which sought an impossible ideal and made that permanent. There is no way to stop chasing it because the chase is what your sense of self is built upon, detached from any certainty of the body and only found in constant, toiling, physical evolution. Body modification presented great opportunity for David. They took a life which was struggling and abused by a system which hated him and allowed freedom. The people they let him find formed his happiest moments. They let him fight back. But they also let him fight back because the world wanted him as a test. His extreme affinity for cyberwar leading Arasaka to let him be so they could one day test the cyber skeleton on him, a massive hulk of tech that destroys the user's mind in under a day. His opportunities weren't made by him. They were allowed so that this test could happen. I think this gives us a clear answer. It shouldn't be that the tools of the harsh world are given to everyone so that we can all fight, so that people can profit off of making those tools. The answer should be to address why the world is harsh to begin with. The answer is context. What is causing that pain that we wish to change? What is making us feel not at home in our bodies? Is any of it actually real, founded in something that exists outside of us? Or is it just an idea society has said is real? Asking us to change our bodies for ideas which only persist from being unquestioned and old? Well, that sounds like nonsense to me.
見たまえ、さらなる上部構造にシフトする時だ。
We can also continue exploring the consequences of body modification with the ever-classic Ghost in the Shell. Talking about the 1995 movie specifically, we get a few long scenes of our protagonists. The main one, Major Motoko Kusanagi, who is a full cyborg, just a human brain in a totally mechanical body, and our secondary one, Bato, who is more of an augmented human, giving up certain parts like his eyes but maintaining most of his flesh. Discussing what their forms require, it takes one of our discussion points from Lain and furthers it, specifically the one about the needs of the flesh. Another way of saying that could be maintenance. Our forms don't last without care, just as a machine doesn't last without the same thing. If you don't put food in your body, it will refuse to move. like a car won't run without gas. Both just must have this resource topped up. If you constantly perform manual labor without pause, your joints will wear out and become less mobile, susceptible to entirely break down, just as the joints and connections in a car can do the same. The point is, maintenance is not a distinction between us and machines. However, pleasurable maintenance is. As we said earlier, nature led us to enjoy our actions of maintenance as a means to survive, almost like a failsafe and for sure an increased drive to do so. Just existing, eating and sleeping and talking, all of that can feel pretty good. But what the Major describes is different. It's never shown to us, but she describes it as regular high-level maintenance, and we can guess how complicated it would be from other scenes that show us the internals of cyborgs. I would not want to have to dig around in that. Well, our maintenance is a need and a desire which can be achieved entirely by ourselves. What the Major knows is strictly a need which just has to be fulfilled before entirely detached desires can be achieved, and it cannot be done by herself. She will always be reliant on others to perform it for her. And this is where it gets interesting, because this drives the separation between the body and mind even further. Think about it. Sure, most of us don't know with our minds how our bodies work, even though, as far as we know, it is required to house the mind. We exist only because of the body, and yet we couldn't actually describe how it continues to exist. We can get a feel for it, though. We know what it needs, even if we don't know how it's using what we give it, and that's something at least. Food, water, sleep, all of this gives us a semblance of control, that we know we can exercise to lose weight or drink more water if we feel the effects of dehydration. We have agency over our forms, which links the body and mind quite well, even if we don't know how it works. But if your body was suddenly a mess of wires and computer chips, would we have that same kind of control? Sure, we know that they need power and cooling and maybe a few other things, but can we produce those things on our own? We can't. We might not even know which ones we would need. We would have no natural indication of what's wrong with us, only mechanical indications that we would have to study and learn. We would lose much of the agency we have over our bodies. The mind would be unable to exercise control over the body. As Bato says,
I'm afraid we've both signed our bodies and ghosts away to Section 9.
The very way in which they perceive the world is not truly owned by them or maintained by their own will. The divide is expanded, and there's only one way to go. If the body isn't yours, you can only find yourself through the mind. This may be why the Major decides to dive in the ocean, even though it's very risky business for a metal body. One mishap and she's dead at the bottom of the ocean, sunken like a second because heavy metal cannot swim. But where else can she look for herself but in her emotions? And where are they more extreme than in facing death? These dives, not only are they risky to induce fear, but they're all about going somewhere dark and lonely, coming face to face with an isolated world where one has little control over what happens. Maybe it's coming to terms with that very lack of control that her body forces on her. But even if not, it is still throwing the body, which isn't indicative of her true self, into dangerous situations to allow the mind to face new frontiers and expand. It's the logical choice. Dive even deeper into the means with which your fulfillment is allowed. Why care about a body if you don't own it? Where, even if you tried to care, you couldn't. Everyone in this world is forced into their own heads by this kind of arrangement. This division has even more consequences on the self, though. There are quite a few things, like memories, which could easily be attributed to the self without thought. But in reality, they require the body. We don't know exactly how memory works, but we know that it is a process of our physical forms, that it operates within the brain. We can even make educated guesses as to why it would arise for survival to stress the point. I mean, you have to remember where danger was to know how to avoid it again in the future, which increases reproduction of the species. It arises as a consequence of nature, it is of the body. However, its physical basis doesn't mean it's solid. As we've talked about before with Ghost in the Shell, memory is rather unreliable. Simple things like the verbiage used to describe a car crash, bumped versus smashed, for example, well, that can influence how we recall the event having happened. This isn't actually altering the memory, it is just suggestion, but the point is that our memories are susceptible to such things. They are not solid and definite, but conjured by present information. In most cases, they're quite an emotional experience, a combination of facts as we best perceive, and the suggestion of our life's narrative, how we want to remember things to craft the story of who we are. They are a mixture of the body and the mind. But that's not so in Ghost in the Shell. It's not clear how this is achieved, but it's clear that memory has been made much more mechanical than it was, more hard drive and less brain. After all, how would the villain, Puppet Master, erase and plant memories if there were not an interface to do so, definitive states which can be changed like code? Memories in their world, they are more definite, made up not of emotions and wrinkles, but ones and zeros. Memory has been made purely physical. This could be a reason why the Major suffers with her identity so heavily, exactly because her memories are more accurate. I mean, this seems like it would make things easier. You can know exactly what you did, where you did it, and when. That certainty would be great, right? But as we said, memories shift over time, fitting not reality, but narrative. How we think our life was or is meant to be, not actually as it is. Because there is no true self, but that it only exists moment to moment, this vagueness is required to have a sense of self that's continuous. As we change, so do our memories, still feeling relevant to a new person. Certain details fade out and others shine more, stressing not who we were, but who we want to be or are now. The old selves are killed for the new one. But when memories are so exact, that can't happen anymore. They simply begin to disconnect from who we are changing into, becoming more and more distant with each new self that emerges. The past no longer fits the present, and the moment-to-moment nature becomes so apparent. It feels impossible to determine who one is because they know exactly who they once were. Every old self lives in a single body at once, and everything becomes nothing. Who are we if we are everyone? And further, memories as ones and zeros would be susceptible to interference. As mixtures of the body and mind, memories are actually pretty isolated. Yes, we mentioned that suggestion could influence them and that they often shift a little bit, but that is a continuous process happening all the time. If one suggestion happens to it, another can later. And studies about false memories have shown that they cannot actually be created, only that there can be enough evidence of a moment not remembered, like altered pictures or your parents lying, that it just becomes logical to assume you might not have remembered something that happened. But when those are removed, so is the idea that the event actually occurred. It's a little bit abstract, but research shows that we don't really feel that these things happened, and so they don't exist in us as memories. I mean, it makes sense. We can't recall any sights, smells, or sounds of the event, nor how they made us feel, the emotions which the moment brought out of us. In requiring the body and mind, memories are just impossible to fake. But here, Puppet Master shows you simply go in and replace the file, and it's done. As this garbage man goes about his day, he'll show a picture of himself while perceiving it as a picture of the daughter he doesn't have, taken away by the wife he never had. And another man will pick up a rifle and fight government agents, believing it fits with everything in his past, only to be shown he has no past at all anymore. These people act with total certainty to a life-altering point based on things that never existed. This is the consequence of electromechanical convenience. As everything about the body is made easier, everything about the mind becomes more accessible, more vulnerable. As our memories become more exact, the possibility of falsehood emerges from that. And this leads into what the self, what the mind may really be: memory. After all, by having his memories rewrote, this man went about his life believing he was someone entirely different than he was. All his motivations for his actions, the stuff of his mind, became unrecognizable to his past self because his past self was lost with those memories. Replace all the history of who we are, and well, who are we? An individual cannot exist without a record of themselves, however flawed and subjective it may be. So if we are this record, does this record create us? If you take all of someone's memories, remove them from the body and destroy it, build a new one and then implant those memories in it, is it the same person? It will say it is, and it is the only perception which can be certain that it exists, so can we argue with it? If we didn't see the operation, we wouldn't even have a way to know, and would simply accept it. It has no reason to question itself, and we have none either. It could doubt that it exists, but in doubting it exists proves that it does exist, because something must exist in order to be tricked and have doubt. The larger question is if the self simply emerges from the act of controlling data then. If a self, a consciousness, can only exist with memory, then it doesn't seem unreasonable to say that the memories give rise to the consciousness, that the body precedes the mind.
I collect information to use in my own way. All of that blends to create a mixture that forms me.
This is what leads to the theory of life that Puppet Master posits. The twist of the movie is that after these false flags, a random android which walked off the assembly line and was hit by a truck reveals itself to be Puppet Master. They are not a human, not a cyborg like the Major despite this form, not even an AI made to say that it is alive, but they describe themselves as a living, thinking entity who was created in the sea of information. They have simply placed themselves within this form in order to get past the cybersecurity of Section 9, knowing that's where this incident would see a rogue android brought to. But if this is the first time that Puppet Master has had a body, then how would the body give rise to the mind? Well, it requires building upon memory being connected to the brain, that is, to the body. If the experience of life is collecting data, then the body may only need to be described as simply the means of collecting that data. That the body which gives rise to the mind isn't a heart or lungs or eyes or ears, not even a brain specifically, but just something which can store and process data, which a brain just so happens to be. Anything which can freely acquire, store, and process this information might have the components of existence required to give rise to essence. And so Puppet Master, existing as a program on the net which had to analyze data and change it to fill its purpose, had all the required components and acquired a will due to the ability these all mixed to create. Under this idea, the body is nothing more than the physical requirements to make decisions, whether that's flesh and bone or electronics organized on chips. This would also demand that the individual is nothing more than a specific organization of a specific dataset, which would answer that age-old question we posed. Yes, your clone would be your consciousness. Now, this would require such a level of precision that it could probably never be done. Some error would lead to a slightly different set or organization, but under perfect conditions, we would have to assume that the result would be a clone of consciousness. But if true, this is where the anxiety really starts to set in. If the body really does precede the mind to this degree, and in a way which we could understand and manipulate as they do in this world, well, what is a self then? When we can be essentially recreated, cloned, and never know it, we lose a sense of continuity and control even more than just what we already lost from the secret of memory being unlocked. You could simply be being recreated from an earlier state in perpetuity, living the same consciousness over and over, never knowing what yourself was used for in your last life as it's reset time and time again. The second a copy of the self exists, so does the abuse of it, and we would never know. We have to figure out where the line is. Do we die with each new memory, ourself? Is it just with each new important or impactful memory? I mean, how much could be altered, and this copy still gives rise to something we experience as us? If the body really is the originator of the mind, then every secret we uncover about it is another aspect of control and torment on the mind. The oddities of Puppet Master's ideas continue when, having been stolen from Section 9 and then tracked down by Kusanagi, she jacks into its mind and they begin to speak through each other's bodies. This is actually what Puppet Master has been waiting for, asking the Major for one thing: to merge with it, ending both of their current consciousnesses and forming a new one from the two. Not a copy, but a child. Reproduction and then death. Two things that Puppet Master finds essential to life. This could just be a series of code yearning for what its birth lacked, just as we often feel damned by our bodies. But it can also be seen as logical under the same framework we've already been using. At first, it seems to say that limitation is required for life to exist, that it can't be endless. And I would agree with that, as many of you know. Infinity is a total dilution of the self. However, this isn't actually why Puppet Master believes this, because they also want the new consciousness they and the Major form to escape onto the net and continue to reproduce and mix, now in this infinite space, untethered by bodies. So do they want limitation or not? But this isn't a contradiction, because they were never actually stating that a body was required or that limitation was essential. It just seemed that way. Really, a body was just a convenience, something which forces those things, reproduction and death, upon us. Like Puppet Master using one to get past cybersecurity, they can serve a purpose, but they are not essential. The end of the theory is, well, nowhere. This new framework doesn't even adjust what we've already said. If the self is just a set of data which can collect more, well, then that self dies many times even as the body continues. Each time enough of that data is replaced, or the calculations it leads to changed, then inherent to the definition of life is that consciousness ceases to exist and a new one emerges. By sharing that information, influencing the selves of others through debate and argument, reproduction is fulfilled by imparting some of one's data into another, which in turn can be done to your own self as well. The information replicates and dies, and us, the composition of data, along with it. Reproduction and death are not simply of the body, they are of the mind as well. Puppet Master brings the question to its fullest extent, not what the link between body and mind is or should be, but what life itself, the combination of those things, is. Are we holding ourselves back by considering the link at all, just as it accused the Major of? Does any of this matter, or are we just making pointless calculations about the components of existence? Has our question been wrong the whole time? There was a time where I was terrified of my sense of self, because I believed it would be pushing out and killing the one which had inhabited me previously. The body which I emerged from decided to enact its cruelty, and in doing so set forward a mind built around that cruelty, which had its habits and expectations, its knowledge of the world and how to interact with it guided by a form which it was not. The propensity of society to take the abstract and categorize it down finished the process and convinced the self that it was there and that a change to the body would be death to it. The first story I ever wrote about a difference between the body and the mind, never published, is a bloody tale of combat for survival, two forced into a grand arena where only one can exit and where an audience full of self-righteousness cheers for death in any form. I've finally come to understand why it was written that way, the belief deep within me that the emergence of a new self was Camus' one and only truly serious philosophical problem. Through fictional blood sport and never-delivered self-eulogies, I'd taken society's terror and amplified it, made the distinction between my mind and body not a blurred cohabitation to examine with curiosity, but a literal war, a struggle for survival. Would every action I'd taken be proven wrong when one self finally murdered the other? Maybe what follows is the influence from my thinking, the desires of the flesh driving the logic of the mind, and showcasing a bias towards justifying myself. But just as likely is that it is a fundamental truth of this world we currently know, this time and place we can't help but exist within, and that deep down it is apparent to all, and I simply needed to prove it to myself in abstraction. It is that, much to increase our fears, there may be no self at all. Sure, there are moments of it. There was a me who started this channel. There was a me who pivoted it to new topics. There was a me who is speaking right now, but these are not the same person. Some of them have experienced less time, making decisions of 18 years, while others have the information which survived 28, maybe not more in total, but more selected and likely more jaded. The collection of information has rearranged, reproduced, and from that emerges a new self who holds all of my memories and justifies itself as a continuation of the one before it as such, even though it never was. Maybe I've already died 10,000 times and the concept is meaningless, each day, each new event killing and birthing alike. But it doesn't matter if it's considered a death or not, or how many times it's been. The only thing which matters is that, for certain, this self is not the self as the ones before it. It isn't possible for one of them to kill the other, because each one emerges from the truly serious philosophical problem of the one before it, the moment its information dies and reproduces. Inside of me was not war, but evolution, natural selection of the self. This, paired with the knowledge that the mind and body must be linked, made me ready to finally shed my skin, find a better body to fit in. I didn't like the choice. I would have much rather never needed to do so. The pillow on my old bed, recipient of the cruel force of so many screams, can attest to that. But the mind is not greater. It is just one half of the equation, and it was time for all the work the mind did to finally push the body to fulfill its half of the deal. Its cruelty could not be revoked, but it could be molded, changed, reproduced, and dying into a new self. The new selves which emerge fascinate me every day as I ponder this link more and more. Against what I'd always heard, that emotions would be more vibrant, that the shameful desires of my flesh would become more in hibernation, I felt strangely consistent. As I learned and jailed in detail before, the chemicals didn't cause a huge shift, but a slow process just as it had always been, selves giving rise to selves. There is no moment where I look totally different, or feel totally different, only moments where I recognize the change, where it feels so different, or where it feels still not enough. Each day is mostly the same, but each month sees progress, each year feels distinct. As always, myself feels continuous in these slight deaths and reproductions. The only difference is that now I have a hand in their direction. The strange thing is how apparent it's made the link between my mind and body. They each surprise each other in a strange cycle. The mind, much more malleable and subject to its swings and adaptations, has discovered odd ways of validity, figured out how to skip past the body to the desired conclusion. What someone could do to me, based on who they would usually do it to, that became the most enticing thought. Who cares what feels good to the body? Think about what feels good to the mind. Classical desires of the flesh be damned. Do you know how good a sound can feel in the right context? Such strange things become enjoyment when they momentarily complete you, look through all of your history and speak to your soul. The mind intoxicates the body, but the body grasps at control in return. What once felt like it would only be pleasure in theory is so easily proven true, or maybe even greater in practice, as if the body is saying, no, this is mine, I am in charge. I know it's nothing more than the means of validity. I could point to my entire life, to how I've been treated and the ideas I've chosen as most important, and tell you exactly how I came to desire anything. And yet they are not something which I must use any of that to justify. They inspire a frenzy, an escape from the chaotic mind which is always on, always within itself, to the body which for a moment forgets, which could forget all it's ever learned in such an embrace. As if in a duel for supremacy, they each one-up the other, body and mind locked in the conflict of deciding what is and what isn't pleasure. Is it because of the mind's influence? Was it because it was always there, but now had only been found as knowledge, a fact of you can't know until you know? Is it me, or who I've learned to be, who I've been trained to be, the self which is adapted to its conditions, understanding that the means of expression don't matter, what happens to the body doesn't matter, so long as some core truths of the character are still expressed? I don't know. I have no idea who I am as I continue to change. I don't think I'm changing any more than I ever was. I think I'm now simply aware of the changes, with an avenue to catalog and share them, and a benefit for doing so, reinforcing the behavior, a consequence of my monetized emotions. But I think this is the renaissance which is driving me into a brighter future. I don't think I care anymore who I am in total. I don't think I care whether the body or mind drives. I only care about who I am today, which is driving right now, the self within context, within the bounds of my life, within the form of my body, which is being actively adjusted by my will, the fruits of the mind circling back around to benefit the body, to benefit the mind. This lack of care for totality has made life a bit more brighter and more interesting to me than the chemicals ever had. They themselves change so little, and I would posit right now that the reason they're often associated with a brighter experience is simply because they prove a link between the body and mind, which then proves the existence of a temporary self and reduces our stress about finding who we are. Whether we are conscious of it or not, we become forcibly aware of slow changes, of crawling shifts to the body, in turn influencing the mind, in turn influencing the body, and then the cycle to the effect of already ended selves. These chemicals, any decided change, force us out of totality and into the moment, into the context, as we discover in the mirror each month, week, and day a new self. We don't feel more because of them. We exist more because of them. This experience of altering one's body to match one's mind, it is not an experience of a specific group of people with a specific condition. It is the concentrated distillation of exactly what it means to exist at all, the human experience of finding oneself. It is something each person is faced with, simply in its most extreme form for a select few. So each day we live as this temporary but genuine self. We live as beacons of life itself. It's hard. I know, it's such a difficult task. But you prove so much in just continuing to live. Take it one self at a time and survive. I know you can, and you're already doing something so great with it.